Hello, welcome everyone to the course PH5BO6 Electrodynamics 2. I am Dr. Binoy Anand from the Department of Physics, St. Joseph College, Irinalakuda. And this course is based on the textbook Introduction to Electrodynamics by David J. Griffiths. So let's start with a revision of last semester's course PH4BO4 Electrodynamics 1. Let's start with chapter 2 Electrostatics. So in physics, we often talk about a source and the field. A field is a region of space around the source in which you can experience certain attributes of the source. Attributes like a force, energy, work, etc. Now if you imagine a fireplace as a source, now the region around the fireplace in which you can experience the heat, that is the field associated with it. Similarly, if you take a moving fan as a source, the region around the fan in which you can experience the wind current, that is the source. So just like that, in electrostatics, you have a charge or a collection of charges, which you can call as the source, and a region around that charge in which you can experience the force due to the source charges, that you call as the field. Now, to measure the field, you need another charge, and you can call that as the test charge. So now onwards, small q refers to source charge and capital Q refers to the test charge. The fundamental problem in electromagnetism is to find what is the force exerted on the test charge capital Q by the source charge small q. Now in general, both source charges and test charges are in motion, but that is a relatively more complex problem to solve. So to start with, let's have a simple approximation. Assume that all the source charges are stationary and the test charge may be moving. So when you say the source charge is at rest, we are talking about the realm of electrostatics. Now, before measuring the force, you first need to identify the location of your source and the reference point. So let's invoke a coordinate system or a frame of reference. You have the option to choose either Cartesian coordinate or a polar coordinate system. It doesn't matter. Now let's first locate the source point. So let me say r prime is the position vector of my source point. So be very careful with the notation. We have three different position vectors here, and the prime notation always corresponds to the source. Now the point at which we want to measure the field, this is the test point or the field point, and that is characterized by this position vector r, and finally the distance between the source and the field point, that is this r vector. Now if you have a single source point small q and a test charge capital Q, the force between these two is given by the famous Coulomb law, which goes by F equal to 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught small q capital Q by r square r cap, where epsilon naught is a constant which is known as permittivity of free space, whose value is 8.85 into 10 to the minus 12 Coulomb square divided by Newton meter square. Now in this particular expression, this term 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught q by r square r cap is the field associated with this source point. As you can see, there is a 1 over r square dependence, meaning as you move away from the source, the strength of the field is decreasing. Finally, at infinity, you have a zero field. Now that's for a single charge. Instead of single charge, if you have a number of charges, a number of point charges q1, q2, q3, etc., what will be the total force experienced by the test charge? So this will be simply an addition, a sum of all the individual forces F1, F2 all the way to Fn. So you can write it as a series summation like this, or the total force you can write as the test charge Q multiplied by the total field E, where the total field E equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught summation over Qi by Ri square Ri cap, where Qi is each of the individual source charges, Ri is the position, the separation between the individual source charges and the test charge. Now, this kind of a scenario is very rare in the real world, where you have a point charge collection. Most likely you have a continuous charge distribution. For example, you take a conductor like a piece of copper. You have a large number of free electrons there, a continuous distribution of free electrons. Now, how do you represent the field in the case of continuous charge distribution? As you guess, the summation is going to be replaced by an integral, and you can, if you take a dq as a small element of charge, then the total electric field E of r can be written as 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught integral dq by r square r cap. Now, what are the different possibilities of dq? Either you can have a one-dimensional charge distribution known as a line charge represented by lambda, or a two-dimensional charge distribution known as surface charge represented by sigma, or a three-dimensional charge distribution known as volume charge represented by rho. So the charge distribution or charge density is nothing but charge divided by the space element. So in the case of the one-dimensional charge density lambda, I can write as lambda equal to dq, the charge divided by dl prime, which is the space element in one dimension. So this prime notation is added here just to indicate that it is a source. Similarly, the two-dimensional charge density sigma can be written as dq divided by dA prime. dq is the charge, dA prime is the area element. Similarly, the three-dimensional volume charge density rho can be written as dq equal to dq divided by d tau prime. So now I can rewrite dq in this expression in terms of either lambda, sigma, or rho. So in the case of line charge density, the field E of r equal to 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught integral lambda dl prime by r square r cap. For surface charge, 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught integral sigma dA prime r square r cap. Finally, the most generic case, in the case of three-dimensional volume charge, electric field equal to 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught integral rho d tau prime by r square r cap. So this is how you estimate the strength of the electric field. Now, having understood that, let's try to understand some of the properties of the electric field. Now, there are two important properties. One is known as divergence, which tells you how much the field diverges from a given reference point, and the second property is known as curl, which tells you how much the field curls around a particular reference point. Now, suppose that you have a region in which the electric field is E and you have a surface S. Now, the total number of electric field lines passing through that particular surface S is known as the flux through the surface. Now, flux is defined as integral of the surface E dot dA. Now, let's take a specific case of a spherical surface. Inside that there is a point charge Q. Now, the point charge has a field associated with it, and the field lines are passing through the spherical surface S. Let's now calculate the total flux associated with this charge. So the total flux is going to be a closed integral over the entire spherical surface E dot dA. We know the expression for electric field from the Coulomb's law. This is 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught Q by r square r cap. Now, the area element you can write in terms of the polar coordinate as r square sine theta d theta d phi r cap. So this is a double integral. You can quickly work out this integral. The limits of integral are from 0 to 2 pi for d phi, and from 0 to pi for d theta. And if you do this math, you will find that this is equal to Q by epsilon naught. where Q is the total charge inside the spherical surface. So even though we have derived this for a specific case of spherical surface, this is a very generic result. So for any closed surface, the closed integral E dot dA equal to the total charge enclosed within the surface Q enclosed divided by epsilon naught. Now, surface integral E dot dA, you can convert this into a volume integral using the Gauss law. So, E dot dA equal to volume integral divergence of E into d tau. Now, the charge I can write in terms of the volume charge density rho as integral rho d tau over the volume. Now, the equation becomes volume integral divergence of E d tau equal to volume integral rho by epsilon naught d tau. So you have volume integrals on either side, which means you can equate the terms inside the integrals. So you get divergence of E equal to rho by epsilon naught. This is Gauss law in differential form. Now coming to the curl of the electric field, suppose you have a source charge small q at the origin and there is a field E associated with it. Now you want to move a particle from point A to point B inside this electric field. Let's compute the integral A to B E dot dl, line integral from A to B. So substitute for electric field using the Coulomb's law and do the integral. You get 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught q by Ra, which is position vector of the point A, minus q by Rb, which is the position vector of the point B. Now if you imagine that your path is closed, meaning point A and point B are exactly same, or Ra equal to Rb. Now in this case, q by Ra minus q by Rb is going to be 0 and you get the closed integral E dot dl equal to 0. Now this is a line integral. You can convert this to a surface integral using the Stokes theorem. So you get integral, surface integral curl of E into dA equal to 0. Since the integral equal to 0, the term inside has to be 0. That means curl of E equal to 0. So you found out the divergence of electric field equal to rho by epsilon naught and the curl of electric field equal to 0. Okay, so far so good. So remember what was our aim? We have a charge distribution. It could be discrete point charges or continuous charge distribution, and we want to find out the electric field associated with it. Now the problem is that electric field is a vector. It has three components. It has an x, y and z component. So every time you make a calculation of electric field, you need to make three calculations: the x calculation, y calculation and z calculation, and it is going to be tedious as the configuration becomes more and more complex. So you want to find out a parameter which is more easy to calculate. So what if instead of vector you need to compute a scalar, and using that you can back calculate the electric field? That's going to make our life much more easier, right? Because scalar has only one component, so your effort becomes 1/3. So this was the motivation behind the introduction of the electric potential concept, and the electric potential at a given point is defined as negative integral from a reference point O to the point R integral E dot dl. Now let's try to understand what is the physical meaning of this. Electric field is nothing but force per unit charge. So you are multiplying force with distance. This is nothing but the work done. So this is essentially the work done to move a particle from a reference point O to the point R, and minus means you are doing work against the electric field. So you can write the corresponding differential equation for this. So it becomes E equal to minus of grad V. Now let's try to make some mathematical manipulations. We have derived the divergence of E equal to rho by epsilon naught, and also we now know electric field E equal to minus grad V. So instead of E, now you can write minus grad V. So the equation becomes del square V equal to minus rho by epsilon naught. This is a famous equation known as Poisson's equation. Now in the special case where the charge density being 0, For example, in the case of insulators or dielectrics, especially when you talk about optics, because one of the important applications of electromagnetism is in the field of optics. And most of the optical elements are made of glass, which is an insulator where the charge density equal to 0. So in such cases, this equation gets simplified as del square V equal to 0. Now, why do we need this kind of an equation? Because our aim is to find the electric field, and we already have a way for that is using our Coulomb's law. But as I said, there are two issues. One, electric field is a vector, so every time you need to make 3 computations. Secondly, if you look at the Coulomb's equation, that is an integral equation. On the other hand, the Laplace's equation is a differential equation. When you first time learned the differentiation or integration in your +1, +2, I'm sure most of you found differentiation much more easy compared to integration, right? So a differential equation is much more easy to solve than integral equation. So instead of trying to spend a lot of time on solving the Coulomb's equation, you can solve this Laplace's equation, get the potential, and from that potential you can back calculate the electric field. Now, for a single charge, you can write the potential as V of r equal to 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught q by r. Or for a collection of point charges, you can write it as a summation. Or in the most realistic cases, you have a continuous distribution of charges. So just like the electric field, you can represent the potential also as an integral 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught integral dq by r. And dq you can write either in terms of the line charge density lambda, the surface charge density sigma, or the volume charge density the rho. So you can compare the expressions for potential and electric field here. It looks almost the same, just that you have 1 over r here and 1 over r square here, which means as you move away from the source, the field is going to die down more quickly compared to the potential. And of course, this is a vector and this is a scalar. So far we have been talking about field and potential in a particular region. Imagine you have two regions separated by an interface. Now what's going to be the behavior of the electric field? Is the electric field is going to be continuous across the interface or discontinuous? That's a question we need to answer. So let's assume that we have a two-dimensional interface characterized by a surface charge density sigma, and I have field above and field below. So let's assume that the field is made of two orthogonal components, a perpendicular component E perpendicular, which is perpendicular to the interface, and a parallel component E parallel, which is parallel to the interface. Now I'm not going into the details of the derivation, and you find that the perpendicular component is discontinuous by an amount sigma by epsilon naught, whereas the parallel component is continuous, meaning the parallel component above the interface is exactly same as the parallel component below. Now, whatever electrostatics we have learned so far, we can summarize in terms of an electrostatic triangle. So we have the corners being the electric field, the electric potential, and the volume charge density rho. Now we have two relations connecting the electric field and the charge density. One is the integral relation, which is nothing but our Coulomb's law, E equal to 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught integral rho d tau prime by r square r cap. The prime notation is missing here. Remember, whenever you talk about a source element, you need to add the prime notation. Similarly, you have a differential relation between electric field and the charge density, divergence of E equal to rho by epsilon naught. Same way, you can write an integral relation between potential and field and a differential relation between field and potential. E equal to minus grad V and V equal to minus A dot dl. Lastly, you have an integral relation between potential and the charge density V equal to 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught integral rho d tau prime by r, and the differential relation del square V equal to minus rho by epsilon naught. So this is a kind of summary of the entire electrostatics. So far we have learned about some of the properties of the electric field and electric potential. Now let's talk about what is the work done by the electrostatic field and what is the energy stored in the electrostatic field. If you recollect the example of a fan being the source, you have the air movement around the fan. So that is kind of a work done. Similarly, if you take fireplace as the source, you can experience heat, which is nothing but the thermal energy. So there are always work and energy associated with the field. Now, imagine that you have a collection of point charges Q1, Q2 up to Qn, and the field associated with it is represented by E. Now you are moving a test charge capital Q from point A to point B. You want to find out what is the total work done to move charge Q from A to B. So work is nothing but force into displacement. Since you are moving from A to B, total work is the line integral A to B. Now force can be written in terms of the electric field as minus Q into E dot dl integral A to B. This minus sign is there just to indicate that you are doing work against the electric field. Now minus integral E dot dl is nothing but the potential. We have shown that before. So if you do this integral, it becomes Q into V of B minus V of A, or V of B minus V of A equal to work done divided by charge Q. So potential difference between points A and B is equal to the work per unit charge required to carry a particle from A to B. Now the choice of the points A and B are quite arbitrary. You can put any positions here. So let's assume that I am moving charge Q from infinity. So A is infinity now to a point represented by position vector R. So you are moving from infinity to R. So this expression now becomes W equal to Q into V of R minus V of infinity. Since potential has a 1 over R dependence, at infinity potential is equal to 0, so which means W equal to Q into V of R. So this is the case of point charge. Now quickly you can extrapolate this in the case of a point charge distribution. I am not going into details of the derivation. You will find that the work done W equal to half into sum over Qi into V of Ri, whereas in the case of a continuous charge distribution, this is equal to epsilon naught by 2 integral E squared by d tau. And what's the physical meaning of this work done? Suppose you have an empty space and you are bringing in the first charge. Of course, there is no field to work against, so the work done is 0. Now moment you bring the second charge, there is already a field due to the first charge, so you need to work against that field. Similarly, when you bring the third charge, you need to work against the first two fields. So this work is nothing but the work done against the field to assemble all the charges. So this is the work done in the case of continuous charge distribution. And this particular equation becomes very important in the case of electrodynamics, because you will find that the energy carried by the electromagnetic field is partly due to this work done. So that's about a summary of electrostatics, and the next class we will talk about electrostatic field in matter. Thank you.